Hey everyone, once again, this is another episode of The Business of Education, and I'm your host, Kyle Walgren. Today's episode was one of my favorites to date. I got to talk to a mentor and a friend, Rita Ferrandino. We talked about the importance of capital. We talked about the importance of relationships and networking. We even talked about navigating the landscape, the political landscapes in the education fields. I think that any young founders, especially in the EdTech space, are going to get a lot out of this podcast. So if you do, share it with your friends, leave a comment. We'd love to hear what you have to say. And if you have anybody that you think you'd love to see on the pod, just leave their name in the comments and we'll try and get them on the show. Thank you guys and enjoy. Hey everyone, this is Kyle Walgren, and today my guest is Rita Ferrandino. I have been waiting weeks to have Rita on the show. I got to meet Rita at Start Ed conference in New York. She brought a world of energy to the stage, and I just couldn't wait to have a conversation with her. And I know she's going to bring that same energy to the show today. Rita, thank you so much for joining us.
Excited to be here, Kyle. Let's get into it.
Yeah, no, Rita, thank you. So a little background, I met you at Start Ed's New York City EdTech conference, where you were one of the judges, one of the dancing judges to come on stage. But then afterwards, you took some time to visit with me and talk about what EdSoma's doing. And I just found it so interesting, your passion for the education technology markets. What got you into education to start with, and how'd you transition to the EdTech space?
Well, I started in the big textbook industry where I worked always in the innovation side. I was at, the big corporate Pearson and Thompson Education. And one day I went, oh my God, I need to be on the side of innovation because we have very large problems in education that we have to solve. And if I want to be part of the solution and I want to have impact, I need to transition into working with earlier stage companies who are able to be nimble and really listen to the problems and come to the table with solutions. And I pretty quickly learned that if you want to work in the side of innovation, you need to have a connection to investment money because early stage companies need fuel, they need capital to be able to grow. And so my passion is really about having an impact. And in order to have an impact, I work with entrepreneurs like yourself on how to scale your businesses, what's your corporate
Mm-hmm.
growth strategy. That always includes a really big piece of understanding the revenue and how to drive revenue. And then what's your capital strategy that you need to have in order to give you enough fuel to be able to get to the next level of growth.
So
That was a
I'm glad
mouthful.
you it was, but I'm glad you answered it the way you did because it allows me to roll into the next question very easily. You founded Art Capital. You touched briefly kind of on the importance behind it, but what was the driving factor with Art Capital, one? And what are the major challenges that you see from standard investment opportunities and going into EdTech investment opportunities? Because I feel like as an EdTech founder, raising money in the EdTech space is way harder than anything else I've ever done.
Absolutely. So, ARC Capital is a private advisory and investment company that works exclusively in education. We work from pre K to workforce development. And we go in first to work with entrepreneurs on what they need to do. What is their corporate growth strategy need to be in order to get to the goals that they need to have. And then from that, after you really have an understanding of what it is you need to do, then we look at what capital do you need. There are some businesses that are able to self fund or that they've got the ability to raise enough revenue that they can drop enough revenue to their bottom line to fuel their growth. But what's really important is that you really understand what it's going to take and what your roadmap looks like. I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs over the years have come to me and said, if you only gave me $1 million, or today they would come and say, if I only had $5 million, and then I would always say, I I hear that every day, but what I
Mm-hmm.
don't know yet is really, do you have a roadmap that makes sense? Do you have the education industry expertise to be able to actually make good decisions? do you have the kind of team under you that can help accelerate this? Because it's not really just about money. I know that's a shock, right, Kyle?
Yeah.
Not just about.
the it's not. And man, I was excited to have this conversation. You brought up, three different things that we've talked about in the past. One, what's your road to revenue? One, I self-funded the first little bit. So, that first $1 million into the company, I did that where a lot of companies don't have that self-funding to start with. So I understand the importance of capital and I understand making that work. And that's really what our investors, for an EdSoma standpoint, have wanted to really understand. What is the actuality of you becoming profitable? You've also served as a CEO for two of your portfolio companies. Tell me today what young founders are missing as a CEO, looking into the three things that you just brought up: funding, runway, and team building.
Well, first of all, in the companies that I served as the CEO of, they were always fractional CEO positions. So oftentimes you can get in education a a person who has a great product idea and they don't know how to scale a business underneath it. They
Mm-hmm.
could be a teacher or a professor or a student who saw a need in the market and wanted to solve that problem, and they come at it from a product standpoint. But that's really different from knowing how to scale a business and attract investment capital, right? So I have gone
100%.
in a temporary, fractional way to be able to help um, bring the business acumen to the table. Some would say adult
Mm-hmm.
supervision. But I really, really like the fractional model. I really like the model of bringing consultants in because, Kyle, it is too difficult in education to think that you understand it. It's a relationship business. And if you don't have somebody who's on the team helping to guide you through those relationships, it's a lot harder to learn on your own.
I love what you just said there on the last part of it. Education is a relationship business. People in the ed tech space know that. I know that. You know that. Bringing VCs into the space, they always want to say, how are you going to scale your sales process? What's some advice when you know that these are relationship based opportunities? When these new founders are getting, how are you going to scale your sales system, knowing firsthand that the number one requirement is a relationship in this space?
Well, that's part of the role. At ARC Capital, we only work with one or two companies anymore a year because we need to put so much effort today into working with them. So if we work with a company and we have our stamp of approval and we're involved in the company, that often takes that edge off of you know, the Jason Palmers of the world, or I know that investment community pretty well. And if I go in and say, we have worked with them to figure out how to scale this process, that credibility actually matters. But not everybody
It
can have an
does.
art capital, right? And so, what I really think you need to do is you need to be able to really break down your sales process. And it takes, this is another thing a lot of um, company leaders don't want to hear. It really takes the CEO to get at least um, 25 um, marquee customers to understand your sales process, to begin to understand your
100%.
sales process.
100%.
And once you get 25, then you got to get to 100. We probably had this conversation because
We might have. I'm lucky. You know what I mean? Like, I'm lucky. I get to surround myself with great people. I don't know if it's just because, well, I know it's because I'm lucky, straight up. I run into somebody every time and I tell them my story, my passion, and they're like, "Hey, I like what you're trying to do. If you're willing to listen, if you're coachable, I'd love to have a conversation with you." And I do get great advice from people like yourself. Um, Team building was one of the things that you'd mentioned, though, Rita. What are some of the things that you look for when you're building a team?
that they're coachable. And I know that sounds trite, but it is one of our most important criteria. So if we're making a decision on who we're going to work with and then possibly invest or take to the investment market, the number one thing is coachable, that they're able to put their ego aside. And I would say flexible, that they
Ooh, I like
understand that,
that.
that they're molding their process, that this is going to weave, and they've got to be able to lean into that flexibility.
One of the things that I want to point out that you said that I heard to just maybe younger entrepreneurs is like after you start working with them and finding out if they're investable, I feel like that's super important because a lot of new CEOs or founders just like go and approach all these VCs and they're like, hey, invest in our company, invest in our company, invest in our company. But not very many of them take the approach like, hey, get to know me, learn what I'm about, let me invest some time into a relationship and then be able to tell them that story and setting that precedence prior to the conversation that you're really wanting to learn about each other prior to asking for anything and how important that is. I've always taken that approach. I took that approach with you. I took that approach with Shaq. And I always wanted to learn first. How important is that to young entrepreneurs to really master, in your
So, Kyle,
opinion?
this is why I adore you, because that's exactly that is such a important nugget you just said, and that is that it is about relationship building. Because the fact of the matter is that there are many more companies looking for investment money than there are investors uh, to invest in them, right? And so it is completely a relationship business. And we definitely, okay, so as an investor, I have far more people, many more people coming to me looking for investment than I have time or energy to talk to, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so the number one way um, I talk to people is if one of my fellow colleagues does an introduction and asks me to. So that's the number one way is referrals from people I care about, and and I trust that they have vetted that person before sending them to me. So, Kyle, you had asked me on a couple of occasions to make some introductions, and I was willing
Mm-hmm.
to do that because I knew you, I believed in what you were doing, and those people, if it fit into their schedule, were much more likely to take a meeting with you than not, right?
And
Um,
those introductions, just for the listeners to know, not all of them are fruitful right away, but there is some that you learn that we need to reinvest more time in getting to know each other, and they have become fruitful. In getting to understand how to present things. So, like, I really want people to understand this. What you're about to say.
So I do think that you need to build a relationship with, you need to become credible, because the fact is, it's not like, well, first of all, our model is that we're never going to just go to our desk drawer, pull open the drawer and hand out cash to people. We are never doing that. We're going to work with everybody first, determine that they've got a roadmap that works. And then if there's a roadmap, we'll open up the gateway to money. Right. So that's, and that has proven to be super successful, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody wins. Um, but
I just
I think
can't
a lot of
influence that
entrepreneurs,
enough to young entrepreneurs, though. Like, they just don't want to hear that. They just want to be like, what do you mean? I have users. Give me your money.
yeah, well, that,
It's just like the I believe that visibility creates credibility. Um, I I said this earlier. I came to you because you were the dancing judge at EdTech Week. You stood out. You knew how to steal a room. Um, but you
and I
judge and
like,
talk. Yeah, and you judge and you lecture all over the country. Harvard. Tell us about that.
well, I'm on the. I can happily talk about lecturing at Harvard, but I would be remiss if I didn't say that I am on staff at the University of Pennsylvania's Graduate School of Education, where I taught the capstone education entrepreneurship course for 4 years, and I currently still serve as the innovation consultant at Penn GSE. So I am able to lecture in those programs at Harvard and at Penn. And I've been to ASU's programs. What I am really good at is talking to entrepreneurs about the very practical things they need to do to be successful. And that is really always what when I do get to go to Harvard, I speak to their education entrepreneurship program about the fundamentals of what it takes to build a sales organization, what you need to do to be able to build a business.
So, UPenn girl, I know that you love what you do at UPenn. March Madness is a week around or just a couple weeks around the corner. Where are they going to stack up?
I'm not so I'm not going to take that bait. I love all the because Kyle, work with companies that sell to all the universities and K-12. So I want everybody to be my friend. I will root for everyone.
I appreciate that, and that allows me to roll into the next question: the importance of staying neutral. You're very active in Sarasota County's Democratic Party. You've served as a delegate at the Democratic National Convention. You're very engaged in your political affiliation. How do you use your influence in the education sector? How do you stay neutral on educational topics? Guide us through that, because education is very tied to political affiliation quite often.
Well, Kyle, I love talking about this topic because this is where the lecture comes in. Okay. So I have spent my entire career selling into public K-12 school districts and public universities. That includes higher community colleges and universities. Public institutions are fundamentally political because they are paid for with state, local, and federal money.
Mm-hmm.
The universities are the same way. So if you are not engaged as a CEO in understanding the state level funding and the federal level funding, you will never be able to maximize what those funding streams have to offer. So my political activism has always been across the aisles to be able to
Mm-hmm.
bring the best educational funding to our schools and our universities. And that by definition is political. And
Very
so
much.
I don't I don't I don't believe in being neutral. I believe in advocating for the best solutions because if you don't go and have relationships with your state legislators or your federal congressmen and senators, you are missing the opportunity to educate them about what the needs are in education. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why if you go to scale an education business, you really have to have a government relations strategy. And that's another expertise of mine that I am very happy
Don't
to.
give too much information about that out. People will catch up if they start catching on here. You got to keep
Okay,
that under
well,
mom.
we'll come back and talk about that. But one of I just was at a lecture at the University of Pennsylvania, and they did an entire day on the politicalization of K-12, and they had some incredibly good speakers who basically said that we've just been fooling ourselves if you think that a superintendent today is not a political figure. They are a political figure. Just get over it.
Very much
And
so.
they are going to get fired. That's the nature of the job. And that's
Mm-hmm.
because a superintendent's key stakeholders are the taxpayers. Those taxpayers are parents and guardians of students, but they fundamentally, a superintendent reports to a board, almost
Mm-hmm.
all of which are elected positions, and those board members are representing their constituencies. So Again, I'll come back and talk about this because if you really get good at understanding the funding streams, you can get good at building your revenue in your ed tech company.
I love that how you pointed out um, picking the side for the best opportunity for what we need is the most important side to be on.
It's not picking a side.
Let me
It's
reword that. Let me reword that. Identifying what needs to happen.
Thank you, because I have spent as much time um, working with other members of parties that I'm not affiliated with who have
Hmm.
great respect for me. First of all, it's pretty hard if I go in with a very well constructed argument about why we need to do this. People will listen. It doesn't, in Florida, most of our elected officials are Republicans. And
Hmm.
and to be effective there, which I have been, that's just part of what you have to do. So understanding what you want to have happen, figuring out how to make it happen, and then being able to drive that is what's important.
I love that. And that's been a huge part of our success is understanding that. And I'm Canadian. I want everybody on the show to know this. I'm Canadian. I don't have an opinion. Let me reword that. I have an opinion, but it doesn't matter. So, but when I build my relationships, it's very strategic. You know what I mean? I'll call out both sides saying, I think they're all full of crap. But my goal is to teach kids how to read. I don't care their political affiliation, their nationality, their location. I don't care
Right.
anything about that. I want to give them the fundamentals so they can have as much equal access to opportunity as humanly possible. And that's my goal. And I feel like that's the majority of the goal for anybody in education. Would you agree with me?
Absolutely. You don't get into education unless you don't succeed in education unless you have a passion uh, for learning. And I would actually argue that there are when talking to your government officials, they actually want to be your fan, right?
They
If you
do.
can teach kids to read, that means that their communities are going to be stronger and they know that. And
Hmm.
that's going to lead to workforce development. And so sometimes it's just a matter of just building those bridges and helping to educate them on why they need to care.
No, that's
And
so good.
Kyle, I'll come help you do that anytime.
Two more things because I promised you I wouldn't take up your whole day, even though I could. AI in education. What's your thoughts?
It's here to stay. It's going to be powerful. It's going to um, uh, it's not just going to shift education, it is going to make education and learning more efficient so we can make more progress. And let's
I
face it,
agree.
we need to make a hell of a lot more progress. And we need to do it
There's
faster.
not enough teachers in the world right now. There's not. The government's not providing. Although we did hear last night that teachers' wages were going to be going up. Um, there's not enough support for them. They don't get respected the way that they should. They're underpaid, over challenged. So I think if teachers could find a way to adopt and accept AI as their supporter, they wouldn't feel as threatened about it as much. Because I promise you, nobody wants their job. Nobody out there wants it. They're far and few between. They work for very little money, very little appreciation, and they deserve more. Looking forward, what aspires you most for the future of education? Both. Let me give you more context. Both in an investment opportunity and from a social impact opportunity.
Well, the fact of the matter is, Kyle, in order for the world to run,
Hmm.
you have to have an educated populace. And
We
one
do.
of the big things that's changed is the global opportunity in education, right? It's
Hmm.
we are educating many, many more people today around the world than ever before. So the pot of education has greatly increased. And I think that's a big opportunity. And I think that a company today, based in Texas, can can um, can not only need to think about the market in the U.S. or even North America, but they can talk about the opportunities around the world. And I think that gives investors a lot more market opportunity to make investments, because investing in education is a long game, and knowing
Mhm.
that there's a bigger market for their long game, I think, is important.
No,
Did that
that's
answer,
so good.
did that answer your
That
question?
you did. You did. You answer all of them. You always do, and they're very good and very fun. And I learned so much every time. For any of our listeners that want to reach out to you, how would they do that?
Um, send me a LinkedIn message. That's by
And
far the easiest.
we'll make sure that everybody's LinkedIn. Are you on Instagram or any of that stuff, or are you LinkedIn junkie like I am?
I'm a LinkedIn junkie, and you really are a LinkedIn junkie. If I send you a
that
message, you can answer right away.
the I've LinkedIn's been a blessing to me, and I think people need to really understand the use case of the tool. There is a lot of spam that comes through there, and I don't know, I think I average like 75 spam messages a day in LinkedIn, but there is one nugget every day, whether it's just somebody asking for some genuine advice that I can actually provide value to their life for, or like an opportunity to meet somebody else. Actually, and I know I'd cut it short, but or I'd cut it there, but I didn't ask you this, and I ask all our guests, your network. How important is it? We touched briefly on it from a sales cycle relationship, but your network.
It
Let's
is.
end it with that.
So I have spent an entire lifetime building a network, and I really invest a lot in my network. And it's I'm only as good as I can only help other people by being able to give what I know and to give them access into the people that I know. So my network is really important, and I spend a lot of time making resources available
You
via
do.
the social channels. And I kind of see that as my give back to the community. Like, I have a grant opportunity for companies to look at least once or twice a week. So I'm always combing um, industry stuff to be able to pull out for people the stuff that I think can make a difference for them. So when I say reach me on LinkedIn, I mean it, because I try really hard to make my network uh, to provide for my network.
I appreciate that. Well, everybody, you've got to meet Rita, who's the founding partner of Art Capital, but more importantly, she's my friend. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you, Kyle.